What are unethical practices schools do? This is at a university level. Say you are a grad student who just secured an opportunity to travel internationally with university funding for your research. You put in a travel request with a suggested travel and lodging budget that gets approved within your funding. You, the grad student, still have to front the money, no matter how much it is, and reimbursement can take 3 weeks, 3 months depending on how much pressure the finance office is under, who operates on a first in first out basis. So, you secured this wonderful grant for thousands of dollars, making no little money as a grad student. Maybe you are even a fully funded student paying no tuition. You still may be too poor to actually conduct the research you were brought there to do. The grad student research programs at universities are essentially a forced labor class that is taking advantage of grad students and holding degrees over their heads in exchange for tons of underpaid hours of research labor. Do some research into how many doctorate degrees are handed out versus how many actual jobs require doctorate degrees and you can see how unethical these practices are. Less severe but limiting kids' access to water. That is, you can't have your drink bottle at the table. Which sucks when you live in Australia and at summer the temperature gets up to 36°C and school is during all the hottest hours of the day. When I was in elementary school you could only have water at lunch if you had a lactose allergy. Other than that you were forced to only drink milk. Lowering a school's funding if the SAT scores are low. If the scores are low, there should be more funding to help kids learn. Completely backwards SMH. This is probably very specific to my home country but period checks. I feel your pain. One of my PE teachers used to record our periods in her register so she could give detentions when we said we couldn't take a shower after the session with that as a reason. I'm the case of there being a fire. I think it's stupid we have to go in alphabetical order. So Adam is happy and healthy, but Zach just turned into ash. In my opinion, they should all just get in a line no matter what. I'm terribly sorry, but something about Adam is happy and healthy, but Zach just turned into ash, was extremely funny to me. Not letting kids go to the toilet when they need to. I distinctly remember one kid in my German class bursting into tears because he couldn't hold it in any longer. He asked at least 3 times. Something similar happened when I was at school. Kid was in my German class really needed to go, but the teacher said you had to ask everything in German. Poor kid was on the lower end of smart. This was a high set but he was carried by other subjects as they would double up for some reason. And he nearly cried because he could ask it in German as he was struggling to grasp the language. If a bully starts a fight and you defend yourself, you get suspending for fighting. If a bully starts a fight with you and you do nothing to defend yourself, you get suspended for fighting. If you run from a bully to avoid a fight, you still risk being suspending for fighting. This is why I beat the poop out of a bully when I was in 8th grade. I figured that if I was going to be suspended for the actions of someone whom I could not control, I may as well learn it myself. Requiring you to purchase textbooks brand new from the college's bookstore because that's the only way to get the access code to complete the required assignments on the publisher's website. Even better, let the professor write the book for the course. They change one stupid thing each year so they know if you get an older edition. Plus they're getting paid to teach the course and write the book each year. I had a bully in middle school grab and twist my thumb hard enough to snap tendon, or whatever is in your thumb. It's been a while, and nothing happened to him since he would have to sit out football if he was punished. I had a student who never showed up and never did work in my class. The principal asked me to change his F to a 75. I emailed back, explaining that the student never made an effort, etc. He told me to be a part of the team and do as I was told. I was only a 2nd year teacher and was afraid of losing my job so I obliged. Same principal. A couple years later, we had a very large student, and as she walked down the bus ramp one day, some boys called out the bus window the filthy things they wanted to do to her while also calling her fat. I wrote them up and chewed them out. When the principal read the referral, he simply said, "Boys will be boys," and tore up the referral. To this day, I wish I would have asked him what he would have done if that was done to one of his daughters, but I was so shocked. It still boils my blood. Same thing happened to me as a teacher. I stuck to my guns and lost my job. A good thing, in hindsight, but it was devastating to me at the time. Bit of a niche one this. My school's gym teacher not only didn't stop bully, but openly supported it because them little soft sensitive fricks need to be taught how rough the real world is, and he would cheer on the bullies when he saw them beating up other students. Good gym teachers are hard to find here, so he's staying was the school's answer to that. Passing students that aren't ready for the next grade because they need to pad their passing rates to keep funding. It's setting the kids up for failure down the road. Some schools focus really hard on certain metrics. One school in my area has a ridiculously high rate of graduates that go to college. They do this in part by strongly encouraging students not intending to go to college to drop out or test out in their senior year. Making school start at 7 AM and the bus route comes by your house before 6:30 AM. So you have to get up around 5:30 to 6 AM every morning. Then say you have an extracurricular activity that takes at least 2 hours, but if it's a sports game it's probably closer to at least 4 hours. Then let's say you have a test tomorrow as well as some homework, so you study work for at least 2 hours. At this point you have spent well over half your day doing school related activities. If you want to get a full 8 hours sleep, which is unlikely, that leaves you with about 2 hours of free time per day, of which a good chunk of it is probably spent eating a meal, showering, getting ready for the next day, etc. And then people are surprised when teenagers are always tired, depressed, anxious, etc. Schools are fricked. I had a friend who had to ride the bus to school and she was the first pickup, which meant she was getting picked up at like 5:30, 5:45 in the morning, which meant she was getting up at least 5 in the morning to get ready. She often slept on the bus while it ran its route. I honestly don't know how she did it. Making kids sell magazines or whatever should be 100% illegal, and I don't know what kind of parents stand for that bulls. When I was in school they still could revoke bathroom breaks, and some teachers still did when they made it illegal to ban them. Additionally, in my time for an entire year 7-8 grade I only had 1 hour of recess in my entire time. Because my special ed teacher felt that recess, which is mandatory by law, was a distraction, so what she would do is punish us so we couldn't do it. This caused a lot of stress and trauma, and she even prohibited bathroom breaks. Looking back, I wish my parents sued. In my state we don't have recess from 6th to 12th grade. Not allowing kids to use the restroom. I was a decently misbehaved 3rd grader. Told my teacher I had a stomachache and I needed to go to the nurse. I asked a number of times. She thought I was just trying to get out of individual reading time. My appendix burst on the bus ride home. Having worked in a private school for 16 years, I have so many answers for this, but I'll limit them to the following. 1. Stating in the shiny brochure given to parents that any possession or use of drugs means instant expulsion, and then allowing students caught with drugs to return after a 2-week suspension. The only kid at my former workplace who was expelled over drugs had it happen because they stole the money they used to buy them. 2. Telling students that if they defended themselves from local bullies they'd be suspended. This rule was dropped after a student ended up being pushed into a river after having their nose broken. 3. Letting students sleep in dorms where the walls were riddled with damp because there was no money in the budget for repairs, while finding the funds to do a full refurb on the toilets in the school auditorium right before the visit of a member of the royal family. 4. Treating male and female students differently. Case in point, a female student caught performing oral sex on a male student was moved to a new school, while the boy was allowed to remain where he was. A student ended up being pushed into a river after having their nose broken. Whoa, glad they at least reconsidered after that. Sounds like a fight in an action movie. My daughter's best friend was running track and the coaches were yelling at her to run more laps. She told them her legs were hurting really badly, so they yelled at her and told her to run another lap. She started crying because of the pain and ended up falling, breaking both kneecaps. As she lay there screaming, the coaches didn't even come to help her. One of the kids called 911, and when they showed up the coaches acted like they didn't know what to do with the situation. To make it worse, my daughter was on the volleyball and track team and they tried to do the same to her, but I went up to the school and went off on the principal and coaches about pushing the kids too hard just so the coaches could win their games. I sent my daughter to a rehab for her leg issues and they said her legs were stressed and the coaches were overworking her. So I will be taking this up with the school superintendent. closing every single bathroom because of one fight in a bathroom. We have 28 bathrooms in our school, all of them closed. Most good colleges chase rankings to the detriment of the student body. There has also been an abandonment from state schools to provide affordable education to everyone in the state. Also, a lot of those rankings are based on graduate programs and have nothing to do with the quality of their undergraduate programs. Worst, probably the sky-high cost of attendance. The most visible evidence of this is the endless list of administrators, administrative assistants, specialists, administrative associates. The list goes on. Unless you are dirt poor and qualify for Pell Grants US, the cost of a name brand school is hard to swallow. Add inflation and it's even worse. Yet, Ontario doesn't play those funding games. Most schools are at about the same level of quality. I mean, sure, there is likely bloat-in admin staffing, etc. But our schools don't have the vastly differing funding levels I hear about in the States. UK here, maybe not quite on the same track as some of the answers, but basically schools forcing university as the only option after leaving school. Never mind college, apprenticeships, going straight into a job, etc. They don't want to hear about it unless it's a university. I've even seen schools making students pay and apply for university even when they've got offers at college or accepted an apprenticeship. I presume it's because the more students that get offered a place at university, then the better the statistics are, and that seems to be a huge focus unfortunately these days. My school made me apply for university even though I was set on an apprenticeship and they agreed. I went through so much stress since my university changed my application because I was eligible for a more academic course. I rejected my university on result day and the school got salty, but frick them as I started my dream apprenticeship on Wednesday. Not so much a school problem, but kind of related. When I was in first grade, a couple of third graders cornered me and started saying things like your mom doesn't love you and will abandon you at school, which isn't so bad. But 6-year-old me was devastated. I told my teacher that I was being bullied at recess and she asked what grade the bullies were in. I didn't know at the time and guessed that they were in second. She pretty much responded, I highly doubt that any of them would do that, but I'll look into it. A little while later she approached me and told me to stop lying. Yeah, you should really be asking your bullies what grade they're in while they're bullying you. Sorry that happened to you though. Jokes aside. There are not enough bathrooms open, ever. At my school there are 5 restrooms for 1,200 students, and not all of them are open during brunch and lunch. The lines are so long, especially for the women's restroom. The staff have access to 3 restrooms on the campus, which only have 1 or 2 stalls. In one building there are over 25 women and only 2 stalls. We get 6 minutes between classes, 15 minutes at brunch, and 30 minutes at lunch. Many of us have serious intestinal and bladder issues due to holding it for years and years of our career. Don't even get me started on how dirty the student restrooms are. Using the restroom should be a basic right. Humiliating and or calling out students in front of the whole class. I agree. That's something that can shake the very foundations of the confidence and self-esteem a kid has and causes long-lasting trauma. Not allowing to drink water. Like bro, no discipline is being inculcated by making me thirst in a place where I'm supposed to pay attention to the board. Dress code policing. Especially for girls. It's demeaning, and I say that as a man. Not allowing to go to the washroom. Once my friend literally started crying because he had to go and the teacher was going to cut attendance if he put a step outside class. She eventually obliged, but what a bee. Yet, something is very wrong if a child must basically publicly threaten to pee themselves so they can go. We have to stand outside for however long the school wants us to. Longest has been up to an hour, in the winter, in silence and without coats. Keeping bad teachers in their positions. Not the same as a good teacher with poorly performing students with bad home life, etc. Making children have to pay for their lunch. I grew up where some students paid full, some paid reduced, and some didn't pay at all, depending on the family's income. If you didn't pay, you got a sandwich with 4 slices of cheese and that was all. But honestly, no one should have to pay at all for their school lunch. Making all the girls walk into a classroom and get down on their knees in front of their male classmates to measure our uniform skirts to make sure they were not too short and up to code. Extremely freaking humiliating as middle schoolers and completely uncalled for. So for about a year, I worked for a federal student loan servicer. People would call in, and I'd try to help them find a way to manage their student loans. I don't want to really unravel the student loan thing, but there are financial aid offices out there that are straight up lying to their potential students. If I had one person tell me that they were told they wouldn't have to pay back their loans if they graduated, I'd chalk it up to that person being an idiot. When I had 10 people tell me they were told that, I think there's someone misinforming them. All these students attended Bible colleges in Tennessee and Arkansas. Put makeup exams during lunch. I'm running on no food for the past 21 hours because I had to skip lunch to do a makeup exam. Thank God the school day is almost over. Side note, I exercise a lot so I generally eat a lot, so this crap is really annoying. Underdeveloped gifted programs. Oh, you get through your work quickly? Here's more. And a couple puzzles. We aren't gonna teach you how to study or teach you the social skills that gifted kids often lack. We're just gonna tack on more work and stress you out. Good luck in college without those study skills we didn't teach you. Just about every school is very hierarchical and teaches kids to never question authority, in this case the teacher principal. Teachers are on occasion incorrect or may poorly explain things, and school policy can sometimes be profoundly unjust. It is heavily indoctrinated that children should never question these things, and it is often punished when they do. This leads to people growing up with a very unhealthy hierarchical approach to just about all aspects of life. Or sometimes they can just be a C who takes pleasure in waving their authority around to little kids, to the point where even their colleagues think it's absurd. Purposely charging my student account with purchases I've never made. The lunch lady told me I couldn't graduate without paying the $0.25 balance on my account. I paid cash for every transaction, and never on my ID card. I asked her to pull up the purchase as proof and she refused, saying it's against school policy. So the next day I tossed a quarter on the ground in her office and walked away. Should have dropped 25 pennies on her office floor instead. On what was probably my first week of secondary school, I was walking out when someone I barely knew passed me a tie he'd stolen from someone else and ran off, soon followed by the other guy. Not being involved, I shrugged, put the tie on a railing, and walked off. Somehow I was the one that got into trouble because the tie was lost. See, another thing that happened, I didn't do pay due to a disability, and one day the girls' coach, a man, pushed me against a wall, somehow offended that I didn't do pay, and said if I were in his class he'd make me do 100 push-ups. I said you teach the girls though, and he went into the girls' changing rooms. Pretty sure he didn't get fired even though I brought it up to the front desk. Man was a frickin' weirdo, and even without our interaction he probably shouldn't have gone into the girls' changing rooms where I'm 80% sure there was still someone in there. I ended up being forced out of the school because people kept trying to beat me, the disabled kid, up, and didn't like it when I punched them back. They remained, but I was classed as troubled for fighting so often, despite the fact I was fighting off people who would either try to fight me or fill me up for God knows what reason. Entire school must have been full of dickheads and closeted lads. Giving students a limited amount of bathroom passes. Making student hold in their pee like they're robots. Amount of allowed absent days. Holding your records and diploma because your parents are behind in payments. I went to a very good but expensive private school, which my parents could consistently pay when I was very young, but struggled after 2008, when they'd be behind in payments. The school would hold my grade sheet from my parents, so I could never see the comments my teachers would have about me. Finally, at my graduation ceremony, I couldn't have access to my diploma nor my grades, which I needed to complete my college dossier, until my parents paid what they owed to the school. Of course people should pay their dues, but taking it with the students made me feel very bad. No repercussions for teachers. USA. For example, in 7th grade, I had a math teacher with very little patience. Math has always been my weakest subject and an insecurity for me for as long as I can remember. So I asked a lot of questions because I wanted to do well and actually learn. The defining moment that hurt and still sticks with me to this day 15 years later was when I took a math test. This teacher told me because I got a low score I would never amount to anything in my life. Literally to a 12-year-old kid. Who TF does that? All that happened was a parent-teacher conference and a week away from her class. Some people do not deserve to teach. Dude, can I just bring up homework they assign you over break? Like those stupid reading things during the summer. God, I hated those. My school got rid of AP classes and integrated the AP students in with normal classes. We were given the job of helping low-performing students with classwork. So instead of learning anything my senior year in my core classes, I was at A. Making me and everyone else wake up at 6 in the morning. Literally everyone looks like they want to die in my first class periods. My teacher even complains about it occasionally. I suffered horrible insomnia as a teenager, still do, and I'm in my 30s now. I slept through homeroom every day and was barely awake during first period. Always got in trouble for sleeping during study hall or after tests. Slept every day on the bus to and from school. I literally could not stay awake and I had to be up at 5 every friggin' day. Assigning 300 problems worth of math homework every night that take 5-10 minutes to write out each. On top of that, teachers do not coordinate, so they all decide to give 3 hours worth of homework per night and somehow expect students to complete it all and not be sleep deprived when they come in the next day. Also punishing the victims of bullying when they fight back. Seriously, may the fleas of 1000 camels feast upon you for the rest of your days. They try to teach accountability by punishing all students if one student misbehaves. Elementary school. This encourages students to dislike school and bullying to the one who misbehaves. I hate it. Most, if not all, comments are unethical practices schools do that affect kids, but there are plenty of unethical practices that affect teachers as well. As with all things, it depends where in the world you live, of course. My wife's an elementary school teacher. A few things that come to mind. They get paid 35 hours a week, but that's the hours they are at school. However, they have nowhere near enough free time to prepare their classes and exams, grade homework and exams, etc. That is to be done at home, unpaid. A lot, and I mean a lot, of required material comes out of their pockets. They have an ever so tiny budget every year for material that isn't even close to being enough. Everything else has to be purchased with their own money. Even at school, if they print copy more than X pages, nowhere near enough, they have to pay for the extra pages. This is more of a COVID specific thing, but in Quebec, due to the explosion of COVID cases, they decided to have Zoom classes until the 17th of January. In the same announcement, the government made it very clear that anyone who can work from home should do so. Next day, my wife gets a message from her school telling her she'll have to do her Zoom classes from the school. Go figure. More specific to my wife's school, though I have no doubts it happens in many other schools as well. The more senior teachers have a lot of influence on how the students are split in the different classes, which often results in them taking all the easy students and leaving the more junior teachers with the difficult ones, rather than try and split them more evenly. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.